We're here today to talk about real estate.
Hello and welcome back to the Real Estate Unlimited podcast. My name is Sierra Steinmetz.
My name is Bryan.
Kari Steele.
Bill Jones.
And we're the Jones Home Team.
And this is episode 15 of the Real Estate Unlimited podcast. We've got our trivia questions at the end. I've got a pretty funny story I found about another a Christmas time real estate agent to a client thing, which is kind of funny here. And a couple different topics. Kari's talking about water. Shuby's got some inspection topics. Sierra's talking, kind of rolling into the inspections or something else. And I got something with the data, kind of what the numbers are going to look like going forward. So everybody's waiting for prices to drop, interest rates to drop, but Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac is going to argue with that. So we'll get right into it. Shub, what you got? Or actually, we'll go Kari. What you got here?
Water.
The
silent destruction. Well, I think it's important because I don't know if anybody's ever seen an image of a rock where water's constantly dripping on it, and it actually can completely erode the rock away. So if it can do that with something as solid as a rock, what is it doing to your foundation? What's it doing to your walls? What's it doing to your interior of your home? So I think one thing, it's really important to address the water right away so that it's not, prolonging that, need to make repairs.
It's not
addressing
you can just wait till you have the time to
yeah, right.
No.
It's something,
water always finds a way.
Yeah.
That's it. Always finds, if it's,
and doing it the right way, because if you I don't want to say half-ass it, and then it can deter into another area of the home. So structural damage, foundation issues. So when not addressed, if water is constantly dripping, like I just talked about, the water on the rock, if that's doing that alongside your house, that can cause all kinds of problems, from cracking in your foundation, cracking in your walls, additional settling that wouldn't have happened like when they first built the home. There's that traditional settling that happens, but this is going far and beyond that. Shifting and sinking and things like that. And then in addition to that, you've got wood rot. Okay, wood rot, then that is also going to invite pests and unwanted critters into your home, because now you're opening your foundation.
They like the water.
Yeah,
Yep.
Now you're opening your
it's a terrarium.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if that's the right word.
That is good.
Yeah,
That is perfect for that.
That's good. Yeah. And then of course things like mold and mildew growth, which I think, I don't know, I feel like people are paying more attention to that than they ever have before in some of our inspections. Health risks, I think, because people that have like respiratory babies that have RSV, people that have COPD, they're going to be especially sensitive to that. And we talked about vacant homes in our last podcast, and about how you can preserve those pipes from freezing. So what happens if it does actually burst? And
Right.
this is kind of the offset of that. And then it can also cause plumbing problems and corrosion in the pipes, which will cause additional leaking, additional water problems, additional mold growth, and electrical hazards. Electrical hazards are especially important to pay attention to. So if you have
Because water and electricity don't go well together, probably.
Not typically.
No, yeah.
Not typically. I think back to CBS. I don't know, when I was a kid, they would show electricity and water and how they don't go together, like plugging in a dryer next to a bathtub or something, and then like the little
Right.
cartoon being shocked. But electrical hazards, that's a big one. And if you look at your circuit breaker or your breaker box, if there's rust, extensive rust, not just a rust spot, but if there's extensive rust around that, you might have a moisture issue that you don't even know about. So I think that's definitely something to point out and to pay attention to. And then of course, if anybody has a leak, they see that in their water bill right away. So sometimes they don't even know they have a leak. They get a water bill for, X $100, and they're like, what? Oh my God, what's going on? We must have a leak or a running toilet or something like that.
Which had accumulate. We've had that at the office a few times. Even if just a toilet isn't operating properly, the water bill goes outrageous if it's just running.
Yeah.
So.
And one thing I think we see a lot in inspections is when the toilet's not sealed good, like around the base of the toilet, and then you walk close and it's just real spongy.
Oh, yeah.
The subfloor is spongy. So even if that electrical, or I'm sorry, even if that water issue has been fixed, there's still long-term damage there that needs to be addressed, before you can, I don't want to say
small problems
lipstick on a pig, they say,
Yeah.
because somebody might just go in there and not know that that's what that is and tile over top of it. And now your subfloor is completely gone. And now they've just put tile over it and they didn't actually fix the problem. So
yeah, small problems turn into much bigger problems. There's a house on the north side of town, exactly that. They just ignored that exact issue, and now they're replacing the entire, gutting the entire bathroom because of that, because the whole floor, and it was probably a $10 fix, now turned into a $10,000 bathroom
remodel.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, they're like, we can't do it. They rip the toilet up. Like, what are we going to do with this? There's nothing. The ground's just, or the subfloor's just gone. So yeah, that would have been a bad surprise. You sit down on that toilet and go right into the basement at some point. I mean, that would have happened.
Yeah,
so.
the money pit. I think of that.
Yeah.
Maybe the money pit. So preventative measures. I've kind of sped through all of that and talked really fast, but keeping your gutters clean, that's an easy one. And that's not really pipe related, but gutters overflowing can cause significant damage and damage over time. If you go outside, it's raining really hard and you see a line going all the way around your house, that's gutter, spillage, if you will.
Right.
And for it to happen once a year, twice a year, okay, that's not that big of a deal. But if it's happening all the time, you probably got some blocked gutters.
Yep.
So keeping those downspouts clean, maybe putting a leaf guard over top, and just getting water away from the home.
I was going to say extensions as well
Yes.
on
Yeah.
your gutters.
Right.
I don't remember what the specified rule is, if it's 6 or 8
Like
feet
how
or
far it
whatever,
is, yeah.
but keeping your gutters running away from the foundation then.
Yeah,
That's
and you
here-
don't think
we're
it's that
running
big of a
into
deal.
right now. We have a couple of these deals here that are wanting the water. Yeah, and to your point, you want to control where the water's going. I mean, the water's going to want to go somewhere,
Right.
so try to direct where the traffic where it's going then,
Yeah.
so away from the house.
Well, and that's it. Yeah. So when you talk about extensions, so if you live on a hill and you have your gutter shooting off the back, that water by default is going to go back towards the house. So then at what point do you say, okay, where can we retract this water?
Right.
Do we dig a tile? Do we put in, some sort of mechanism that tracks that water away from the house? So
Yeah, and it
just
doesn't have to be overly complicated.
proper
Sometimes just bringing
drainage.
dirt in,
Yeah.
I
which
was gonna
isn't
say
that big.
grading
Just,
of landscaping's been a huge one that I've seen lately, of just, not that there's any present issues, but just to keep them away preventatively, to just make sure that landscaping is on a bit of a grade.
Yep.
And so that water's getting away from the home.
yeah, and you
the
can
home
see.
inspections come up with that all the time. There might not be an issue, but then they say, you need
If
to
you
address
don't
the
want an
grading.
issue,
You're right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I was
Water's
gonna-
going to find
another
a way.
thing with the landscaping is bigger trees and stuff that maybe sit up right up against the foundation.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that
Get them away from it.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think you can, when you go to a home inspection, or even if you're just walking, if you're an agent and you're walking around the house, you can see if there's a broken gutter and part of it's on the ground and part of it's coming straight down. You can see where the land is starting to separate just from however long,
from
6
that,
months,
yeah.
a year.
Yep.
So yeah, untreated, it can turn into really big problems.
I do that a lot of times if I'm walking around a house showing, and a lot of times the gutter's just disconnected.
Yeah.
Just pop it back on there.
Yeah.
They just look for that stuff.
Yeah, people don't think about gutters as being like a huge home improvement because they want to focus on their kitchens, their bathrooms, their decor, maybe sealing their garage floor, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, new gutters and getting the water away from the house is probably one of the most important things that you can do
Yep.
out, to improve the value of your home and keep the value there, I guess.
One thing, total kind of side note, or along with that then too. So an appraiser, we all know him. I won't mention him by name. But he said on property disclosure, so this goes for clients and agents both then, he goes, I think it's Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, one of them is making a huge deal about water. And in our town, there's a million, 100-year-old plus basements out of rock, and there's water seeping through, where we just see that as normal. That's just what the basement is. It's not necessarily a water issue, but there's, that little bit of water accumulation. So if they have to note that, then the bank is going to kick that back immediately and say, then you need a foundation inspection or a structural engineer, something along that line. So so said just to note that in the property disclosures, and then even us as agents make a note of that in the MLS. Thought that was kind of overkill, but I think
It
at least
is,
having it in the
because
disclosure.
You
At
got
least
a
it's
house that's
known.
from 1800. It's 2020, almost 5 now. That house has not moved, hasn't shifted,
Right.
nothing's happened. And the floor, a lot
It's
of
going to fall
those
apart
are...
tomorrow, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I mean,
made
back
of
in the
like
day,
a
people just
brick
didn't
foundation
finish.
or
I mean,
block.
finished basements
Right.
weren't a necessity. They just they were there to access what they needed to access, and yeah, they didn't need fully finished waterproofed basements.
Sure. Well, I think they want it to be up to like today's standards. Like a house built in 2024 is not going to be built the same way as a house 150 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and that's just how the basement, we all know that, we accept that. Anyone with older homes in a community accept that. But yeah, he said just note it in the disclosure, for the seller to disclose it and then the buyer to acknowledge it. And that should eliminate a follow-up inspection or further things like that. Not necessarily always, but he recommended we put it in there.
For those really old homes, they like actually trenched out a
Right.
water spot. So when water came in, it just went straight over to the drain, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that was how
Yep.
they dealt with water.
They're trying to control where it's going. Then.
Right.
At least, you're not just letting it accumulate somewhere, cause
Sure.
further damage. But
So
yeah.
one thing you could do, I guess, would be waterproofing, using like sealants on the basement, and they have like a waterproof texturized, what is it, latex? I don't know, a paint for the basement that
Sure.
You could put on the
Like
walls.
the
and
dry
help.
lock paint.
Dry
type
lock,
thing.
yeah.
But again, that doesn't stop. I think a lot of people have the misconception you can put that on there, it's going to just waterproof your basement. The water's still going to find a way to, it's going to start bubbling and coming through.
In other
but
places.
It'll help though.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Well, that's-
so that's all
And then
I got, but I
sub
think it's
sub pumps too, and then backups, backup batteries and stuff like that
Right.
as well, just to help.
yeah, okay. A lot of the reports that we see, at least that I see, if somebody writes something in the residential property disclosure, it'll say something like rust on the bottom of the furnace or the bottom of the
Hot water
heater
Right.
is from the sub pump backing up in whatever year. And
Yeah.
I think that's really common, especially if there's a power failure or no backup battery.
which I have. Well, it leads right into inspection. Shoop, you're going into that.
Yeah,
then.
just wanted to quickly talk about, what inspections I guess we have built into our contract and when may be the right times to utilize some of those. I think the most generalized would be the general home inspection, where they look at, your roof, your electrical, your plumbing, your heating, your AC unit, and just the basics of the home itself. I would say most of us probably usually always recommend at the minimum doing a general home inspection.
Yeah.
And those vary on price based on the square footage of the home and how far that home inspector's traveling to get that done. Then I would say what you guys see mostly $350 to $450 usually, somewhere in there.
Yeah, in our area, it seems like that would cover most. Like you said, unless it's some exceptionally huge house or there's a big building or something you're going to look at.
Yeah, there's something
then,
additional that they're adding
yeah.
to it. And then some of the other ones that we do, chimney fireplace, I would say I don't really run across those a whole lot. I don't know about you guys, so as far as pricing, I'm not 100% sure. But that would be something I know most of the general home inspectors usually note on their report if there is a chimney or a fireplace, maybe have that separately looked at before you use it. If you don't plan on using that fireplace, then maybe you don't need to get that done. But if you do actively plan on using that fireplace, that would be something to maybe get looked at before you actually fire it.
A lot of people feel like they don't use them anyway. I ask that all the time. You guys
Yeah.
plan on using it? Well, probably not. Well, it might not hurt to have it looked at.
The general home inspection, they'll kind of take a look at it as well too. I mean, if there's anything growing in the flue, I just had that. If there's foliage or anything coming through, or they'll take a minor look at it just to get kind of an overview. And if you're not going to use it,
Bats
Yeah,
and
bats and
birds.
birds.
Oh, I've had bird nests and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think last week we had talked about, as far as the more modern home buyers, a lot of them are just switching to electric. There's not very many people who actually utilize a wood fireplace or anything
Sure.
like that. I would say, maybe electric and gas, but yeah, there's not a whole lot of people who actually want to cut wood and do the whole wood thing now. And then
Knowing how to use the fireplace. 'Cause that's the other thing. The flue that I've had, the one homeowner did that, bought it and threw wood in there. Like we're going to have a romantic fire. And didn't open it. And that smoke is just
Right in
rolling
the house.
right into the house first night. Yeah.
Interior gas line. Again, this is one of those. I haven't personally. I've maybe had one or two here recently that have done an interior gas line inspection. But again, that would be something, if you're concerned about, gas leaks or something like that you'd want to have done.
Probably should be concerned with that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want that.
Lead-based paint. I would say this is another one we don't typically get a whole lot of. However, if the house is built prior to 1978, it always has the possibility to have lead-based paint. That's one of those I usually tell people, as long as, you're not going to go around eating the paint chips
Yeah,
off
don't
the
chew
floor or
the
something like
paint
that.
up.
lick the walls.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's one of those inspections where, it turns into a little bit more of a process to get it remediated if there is a problem. So
Yeah, it could be a big issue, big
Yep.
expense. I don't know that I can't remember the last time somebody did an actual lead inspection. Have you guys had any? I've had people check it, but it's always been removed for whatever reason. I can't remember. It's been a lot of
I was going to
years.
say, I think since I've never had one person do a lead inspection
Right.
Yeah, I
since I've
haven't
started.
either.
So Kari?
What is that? No, I'm just thinking of that house. I think it was on North Sandusky, and it was I don't know if it was a foreclosure because of lead-based paint, but there was a sign on the door that it was lead-based paint, so they must have obviously had knowledge.
Done a test.
I was
And
gonna
it was
say,
a very old home.
I remember there was
very
a house on
historic
Liberty
house.
Street. I don't remember. It was a little ranch. I remember that one had something in the disclosures that it had been remediated, but it was already taken care of prior to listing.
I've had that once where the health department, I think, told the previous owners that they had to get it taken care of before the house could sell.
Sure.
So for whatever reason, they were aware of it.
Okay.
And then it was remediated before it was put on the market.
But like we just talked about with the basements, we're in a neighborhood or a town with very old homes.
Yep.
And I'm sure, under 13 layers of paint, there's probably something there from 75 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Couple others here. Mold would be another one. And this is where I usually tell people, it depends on really what your concern is. Kari, I know you kind of talked about this. If somebody has some asthma problems or, is allergic to some stuff, some people are more sensitive to mold and some people aren't. So, if that is your case, maybe that's one of those where you'd want to have that done. I usually tell people, typically a general home inspector will note physical, if they see something that may look like mold, they may say, hey, look, this is possibly mold. And then we could always go back and ask them to have it, the buyer have it further evaluated just to make sure. And then you could also do your air quality mold, where they come in and test the air to make sure everything's below, what it needs to be.
Like we've talked about a couple podcasts, there's mold everywhere.
There's
mold. Just, is it bad for you? Is it a
and
level
the sensitivity
that you
too.
Right.
I mean, when the twins were little, they were on, when they first came out of the womb, they were on breathing assistance. So when we brought Kurt home as a preemie, that was one of the things that we were looking at was air quality and keeping a purifier going because he was really sensitive to smoke and mold and dust and dander and all those things.
All the stuff.
Yeah.
Radon would be another one. Depending on where you're at, I think you can get on some maps and stuff and see, what areas are higher in radon and which ones are lower.
Sure.
But that would be another one, if you have a basement, again, that's one of those, it just depends. If you have a basement and you're going to be using it as active living space, maybe you want to look into that a little bit more than if it's, just an unfinished basement or if it's just an old basement like, what we got in town, with some of the older homes and stuff, as far as crawl spaces and stuff, I don't see people or slabs. I don't see a whole lot of people typically doing radon with those, but again,
a lot more radon tests now than there were 10, 15 years ago for sure. So
I think some of that just goes with the, the stats and stuff that some of the people have looked into that shows, what that could potentially do to people then as well.
And that's kind of the same thing as mold though too. It's literally everywhere. It's just a matter of if it's a level that's dangerous or not.
Yep.
So.
Again, I know we've talked about this to death, but septic systems, again, depending on where you're at, a lot of your city properties, obviously it's city water, city sewer, so that's not a necessity. However, if you're out in the country, you got a septic system, that's something you may want to get looked at just because that's one of those things where it's not $1,000 fix. If something's wrong with it, it could be, $20,000, $30,000 fix.
Sure.
So, structural, I know Kari, this kind of goes into what you were talking about as well. In some instances, if you got cracking or significant water coming in, maybe you want to have a structural engineer or, somebody that knows construction come in and just verify that, hey, look, yes, it's getting water, but this is typical for, the age of the home or if there's a bigger issue that's going on there.
Or like you just said earlier, the house has been here for 150 years, hasn't moved an inch. So, yeah.
Right.
Water well, again, this more pertains to properties that are located out in the country, looking for bacteria, E. coli, nitrates, nitrites, all those things, just to verify that water is, safe to be drinking or, maybe you have a purifier system or something like that can pull some of those things out. But again, that's one of those where it could be an easy fix, depending, it seems like a lot of those are fixed just by, bleaching the well or, doing something, a cleaning process for the wellhead then.
I find usually if they're doing a well test, they're probably doing a septic inspection too. I almost never have them separately. It's usually both at the same time.
Yep.
And VA requires water potability, right?
VA would require the next one, which would be wood destroying. I don't know if they.
No, I know they do
the
pass.
well.
But if there's a well, you have to do a water test too for VA.
And then your wood destroying insects, which Kari just said the VA is going to require. And then that would be something, again, the general home inspector will usually note if they see potential termite damage or insect damage, which, we could always kind of lean on to go back and say, hey, look, they found what looks to be, further damage caused by insects. We just want to have somebody look at that and take another look at it. And if you're really, really concerned, then maybe that's something you do separately. So
Yeah, and that was one that you don't just have a normal pest. They have to be certified or specialize in wood destroying insects to come in and look at it. So.
And then again, all of these inspections, you can pick or choose which ones you want. You could add stuff. Some of the maybe you want to do a roof inspection or something like that. So you just need to be very clear on what inspections you want to do. So that way, obviously the seller can make an educated decision, because as we all know, sometimes if you're doing one inspection, somebody else is doing 4 inspections. Maybe that figures the seller takes that into consideration with their offer. There's more things that go into
how much are they going to dissect my house?
Well, that's
if I'm selling
it. You talk about the findings of the report. So if they do a general home inspection and they're like, oh, I found this. Okay, but of the 16 items you just told me about, 10 of them are what we can actually see. So why would you even put that in there? Like, they either disclosed it or you can see. You can see that window is cracked. You don't put that in there that the window is cracked and you want to, you can, but like if you can already see it and they've adjusted the price appropriately because of those things, because of those items, then why attack them? And
you don't come back and beat them up later.
No,
for
and
the
I
same
think that
issue.
puts, it just puts you in a better position if you do, like you said, if there's one agent that has a buyer that has 4 inspections and all you're asking is for the general, you probably have a better chance of moving forward. Now, can you get to the general and decide you need an additional 3? Yes. But it just puts you in a better position as a buyer to just do the general and then, additional findings from there.
Bill, and I know we've ran into that a couple times. I'm sure you guys have, where someone will make an offer and let's say it's $100,000. Well, the seller comes back and says, hey, we want $120,000. Well, suddenly when they get their offer accepted, they get their inspections done. So that buyer now all of a sudden is like, well, here's all these problems. We want it back to 100. So they kind of, use those to try to beat back down on price. Which
that's their anchor point. They want to get right back to that. Then. Yeah, it's kind of funny.
And in some cases you can, if it's not, what do you say? Like, you can't see the problem with the naked eye. And there's things that turn up that they didn't know about, then they're in the driver's seat to say $100,000.
It's not like, hey, it needs a new
I need to paint
outlet
everything,
cover. New outlet cover, and now all of a sudden, it's a $20,000 price.
Yeah, you're talking latent defects. I guess what you're talking stuff you can find that's not visible to the naked eye then too. Yeah, that's to your point though. Too. You don't come back and say, well, here's these 10 things we already knew about. I want a $5,000 price reduction. That's I
think that
find
goes back to like having a good agent on both sides.
Right.
Yeah. A good listing agent is going to say, let's go to this price for these issues. If depending on what the seller wants, what the seller prefers. But if the seller is just trying to sell this home, they're going to say, okay, let's price it here because this is wrong, this is wrong. This is going to be obvious to the buyers that these are issues. And then on the other end, when you have a buyer's agent and their client does a home inspection, the buyer's agent can be like, well, they did put the price at this price point, and that aligns with the issues that are there. And so then that way you're also not having a almost pointless conversation where the seller's getting beat up for things that they already priced accordingly too.
And if the house isn't great, like if the house is a good house and it's a very popular house, and if you come in as a buyer's agent or a buyer and you beat up the price, and there's 5 other people waiting,
they don't care,
or multiple offer situation, they're going to say, you know what, we don't care about your inspection, we don't care what you're trying to do, you've upset us, we're going to move on to the next one. And we know that the next 3 are just biting at the bit to get a hold of this house.
And that's a hard conversation to have as a buyer's agent. Like you're just talking about here, you have to have a good agent. And so you're talking to that buyer, like, look, you're putting yourself in a terrible position. I understand what you're saying. I understand that, you're not happy with that or the price needs to be adjusted. But to your point, Kari, there's 5 other people that are ponying up right now. I understand you're concerned. I understand what you think about price, but
so maybe this just isn't the home for you.
No. And then ethics from a standpoint of a buyer's agent, because you have to represent, you're not trying to be the seller's friend, you're trying to be your buyer's friend. And so by doing that, you're like, I can be brutally honest with you and tell you rainbows and butterflies, but that's not going to get you the house.
Right.
So I can tell you to write all of this stuff I don't know, we got that one. Somebody put an offer in and they checked every single
I want all the inspections, everything.
Like, are you serious? I've never seen this before. But at the same time, you have to walk that line of ethics and also doing what's right by your buyer. So if you do see some really big red flags, like, oh, the electrical box is completely just non-functioning and you can't move into this house until that's repaired. Okay, that's something you probably want to put your dukes up for. Or the furnace is leaking gas or propane or something. Okay, that's something you should probably put your dukes up for. But if you're saying, oh, electrical cover or the front doors chipped on their paint or those kinds of things, like tire kicking.
That's one of those. I think ultimately a buyer needs to decide, what they need to do to feel comfortable to move forward.
Right.
With the purchase.
Yeah. And it's in those things too. Okay, we see those, but you just need to reflect your offer accordingly. But it depends on how competitive it is. And going back, it's a hard conversation to have with that buyer then too, because then I think you hit on it. Well, are you working for me? Or you're working for the seller? No, I'm working for you as a buyer's agent. But if you're telling me you want this house, you're not putting yourself in a good position to get this house then.
Yeah,
if you know
especially when 3 or 10 days before you're saying, you got a chance to renegotiate. Once that, comes back, you can renegotiate the terms, renegotiate, the findings of the report. And now, it's like walking that fine line between, yes, that's true. However, if you do that, you could lose the house.
Yeah, especially if there's backup offers and things like that. Yeah, so that's tough.
Good
cool.
topic.
All right. Sierra, you kind of rolled right into that here. Do you have anything else you wanted to bump into that here?
Yeah, I have a couple scenarios. Just talking about bumps in the road during the buying process.
That never happens. What are you talking about?
Just because I feel like especially a lot of first-time home buyers or people that haven't bought a home in a long time might not always know their options when they get to certain points in the process, especially with the home inspection, kind of like we were just talking. You kind of have 3 ways to go about an inspection: good, bad, or indifferent. If it's a good inspection, you're okay with it. You're like, okay, maybe we need a couple of GFCIs, maybe this, that, or the other, a little bit of landscaping to keep water away, but you're okay with it. Then you can say, all right, let's go ahead, sign off on the inspection release, move forward. And again, you have a 3-day period once the inspection is completed to decide how you want to proceed one way or another.
Well, depend upon our contract.
Our contract.
Our contract.
Well,
yeah.
And so then if it's a really, really bad inspection and you're looking at everything that's going to need done, just a bunch of red in the report. And
it's all bad. The whole house was bad.
Expensive.
84 pages of red.
Yes. 124 or whatever we had a few months ago. Then you have the option to just back away and say, this isn't going to be the house for me. We don't have the money to invest in these repairs, whatnot. We're not going to ask the seller to put this amount of money into the house just trying to sell it. You know what I mean?
Which happens. I don't even want to ask. It's going to be so much. I can't even ask. Let's just back out.
Yeah, in that case, then maybe it's just not the home for you.
Right.
And then the kind of in-between ones where you have one way or another, there's a chunk of things that might need taken care of, but overall could still go through with the purchase. You have the option to either ask the seller to do those repairs, if they're willing, ask them to take care of contracting that or whatever needs to be done to have that repaired, or do a price reduction to cover that cost that you're going to incur eventually when you own the home. And you can go either way on that, whatever is going to be most logical, most comfortable for you as the buyer, since you are taking on this investment. But you do have those options going through that period to decide what you want to do. And like you were saying, if you have a general home inspection and there's some cracking or whatever that is noted in the foundation, you can have a structural engineer come in and do a second evaluation on it just to get more peace of mind or clarification on what needs to be done. And again, that would kind of be something that's maybe a buyer expense because it's more of a second inspection. Whereas if you're having any type of other repair, a lot of times you can just ask the seller to pay for that if they're willing and agree upon those terms then.
So that's the time for me to submit my wish list of everything I want done.
Add
in
a
the house.
back patio.
Yes,
What is
Deck,
what do
pool.
you guys see as your most common number for items that come back on an inspection report, either the buy side or the sell side? What would you say is average? Like a
dollar amount you talking? Or
no, line items of items that are red or really important to the buyer that be repaired.
Roofs.
You're kicking.
Yeah, I was gonna say it'd be
Yeah.
like the big items, your furnace AC, your roof.
No. I mean how many items? Like 1,
Before
2,
they're gonna
3,
ask
4.
For repairs.
Because the inspection has 400 things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it
How
just I think it just depends. I typically maybe 5 to 10. Somewhere in there,
what's
depending
average?
on what they
Like
are.
what you're asking to get fixed?
yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
what you're-
So initially you go to the inspection report comes back in that first 24 hours and they get 80 120 some pages back, and they're going through the items and they're like, okay, we've got 10 16 items, and we're like, okay, well, you can't beat them up on everything, so we kind of go through and get it down to a sizable amount. What would you say that you end up putting into an inspection release or addendum that these are the items? Like, how many things would you say is typical? What's a typical buyer?
I mean, I'm trying to think. Most of mine have 3 to 5.
Yeah, I was going to say
something
about
in there.
3,
Yeah.
because I feel like if it's over 3 to 5 area, they're if they're going to
The
ask
whole
for
deal's
that
going
many
south
it's
fast,
just
yeah.
not going to work out
Yeah.
usually. But I feel like 3, 4, 5 is usually a pretty solid
Yeah.
number of
If it's
I
more than
think-
5,
I
that's-
think some of that just goes into, if they're asking for 10 or 15 small items, then, maybe
Yeah.
that's something the seller can just knock out.
That's
Whereas,
true.
if it's 2 or 3 small items and then all of a sudden the furnace and the roof, well, that turns into a whole different,
yeah.
ball game.
Yeah.
I think minor things are how you as an agent and sell side or buy side set the expectations then too. Because if
True.
you don't give them anything to work with and they
Yeah.
see that big scary report,
Yeah.
oh, I need 85 things fixed. Well,
Yeah.
this deal's done. If you
Yeah.
can't reel them back in a little bit, you're buying a used house.
Yeah.
So
I think that's important too, going back to just inspections. If you're worried that your buyer is going to be a bit of a worrywart with the inspection and they're going to see 42 pages and freak out, make it so that they can go. Because if you have a good inspector, they're going to walk you through
Right.
what they have to mark down, but is not necessarily a game changer. They're going to explain how it's an inexpensive fix or it's going to be easily changed and whatnot, but it's going to show up in the report, but you don't, that whole house is not on fire. You know
No,
what I
Yeah,
mean?
I think it's just important that you let your buyer know that inspector's job is to walk through and
Yes.
find things that are
Yeah.
wrong with the home.
Right.
They may not be the end of everything. Maybe some of those are like we just said. Maybe they're just, hey, it doesn't have a handrail. Again, a handrail is not the end of the world, but maybe there is a situation where you need it or you don't. So it's just one of those. The buyer needs to look at the items that are listed and take into consideration what is absolutely necessary and what is not.
And I was just going to say that too. Like, inspectors are under a magnifying glass now because if they don't disclose every little thing. And so that's when I'm setting up with a buyer and letting them know that this report's going to come through. And it could be 40 pages, could be 150 pages, that these inspectors are now under a microscope if they don't find something. So it's not really about
Yeah,
what
they
they
don't.
find.
They don't mark a little
Yeah.
crack in the roof,
Right.
and all of
Yeah.
a sudden it starts leaking.
And it's not
they're-
what they don't find, or it's not what they find, but rather what they don't find. And also, when you get that report back, you're looking for what's important to you, not the inspection as a whole. Because if they come to my house, they're going to tear my house apart. But what's important for me right now in this moment for these repairs to be made? So
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that's my honey-do list.
Right, yeah. Sierra, your point about maybe them being there, it's a lot easier for them to go hear it from the horse's mouth from
Yeah.
the inspector versus then you get the report. Okay, Sierra, they're freaking out. Here's 85 things. What does
they
this
open
mean?
A PDF
What does it mean?
and they just cry.
Yeah, suddenly it's now on you, the agent, to try to walk them through. And again, you want to feel like you're working. I mean, you are working for them in the buyer's instant that you're not sticking up for the seller. You're not
Right.
justifying, oh, well, you'll be fine with that hole in the floor. It's just,
Right.
something could be
That's
addressed.
one of those. The
yeah.
buyers ask for 5 outlet covers to be put on, and you're just like,
Yeah.
the outlet covers are 35 cents at Lowe's.
Yeah,
You can't
I'll go get you a
Yeah.
12-pack
Yeah,
at
you
Lowe's.
can't
It'll
go
be,
put
it'll
them
be
on.
easy to put those
Well,
on.
happy
I'll go do it if I
closing
have to.
gift. Yeah, I'll do it
I'll get you a
myself.
couple 12-packs, depending upon which we're looking at, electric cover. And then from the seller standpoint, we run into this every now and then too. The seller gets a copy of the home inspection, and they feel like they need to, they don't necessarily want to fix it, but now we're fighting about, the buyer's not even asking for, they're asking for A, B, and C to be fixed. They're not asking for X, Y, Z, but then the seller's all up in arms about X, Y, and Z. They want
Yeah.
to justify or explain.
Yeah, they
or,
get defensive over the report.
like they just start writing a book back about how this isn't a problem or why this is an issue, or I'm going to call my guy. And it's like, nobody's even asking for that at this point.
Right.
That doesn't need to be addressed. So, but yeah, so I think just setting the expectations helps a lot.
Moving on, we'll get away from the inspection
Sure.
talk a little bit. With appraisals, I did want to ask you guys because I feel like I haven't had the issue of appraisal values coming in low, and then I've had 2 in the last couple months.
You jinx yourself.
Yeah. How often do you guys have appraisals come back under value?
Recently, I haven't had, but just
I'd say I probably maybe had a couple this year.
one
Not
or two.
anything
Yeah,
significant.
and I had 10 coming in.
I mean,
Right.
yeah, just 1 or 2 in my career.
But I think that's one of those where I typically don't see it unless we get into a bidding war. there's an
Yeah.
Sure.
escalation clause or something utilized. That's when I would say I have a lot of mine that come back low.
I was worried a couple of years ago because some of those offers that were coming, I'm like, I don't even know if
And
this
they
is
were
even
all
possible.
fine for the most
They
part.
were
It was
fine.
insane.
Yeah.
Well, because they knew like the transaction wasn't going to move forward unless they did. That values went up so fast.
Well, then the argument always is then, again, the same appraiser just arguing about that then. When you have a house that has 3 or 5 offers on it, they say, well, it wasn't worth that. Like, it absolutely, if there's 5 people that say,
Yeah.
I'm willing to pay X for this house, that is the market value. I
That's
understand what
right.
they needed to go through to justify the price. You know, they're always looking in the
Charts
past.
and graphs and
Yeah, so they need to adjust values to comparative to what sold. But you know, going forward, and I will probably save this for next week. But talking about pricing going up, you know, it's not coming down. You know, the prices are still maybe not going up as significantly, but yeah, going back to COVID and stuff was just going through the roof. Yeah, I was surprised we didn't have way more appraisals come in that were low.
Yeah. And I've had 2 in the last couple months. And I mean, we worked on one together. Both of them were within about $5,000. And it, like, you get the report back and you're just like, are you kidding me?
You can't justify $1,000.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And especially the one that we worked on together, there was multiple offers. It was a highest and best situation. So clearly there was a lot of interest. It was a decent home despite there was obvious cosmetic defects with it. And it was older, but for the most part, pretty solid. So then the other question I wanted to kind of give you guys with appraisal repairs, who do you usually find that those repairs fall under their responsibility for?
You talking buyer or seller?
Yes,
kind of
because
thing?
for in my experience, the only time it's usually a buyer expense for the most part, and not every time, but almost every time that there's chipping paint, I find that the seller wants the buyer to take care of it because it's FHA loan, it's loan specific.
Yeah, you're coming to me with this FHA loan.
yeah.
You figured that out.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
a lot of the times, if it's nothing crazy, the seller is usually like, okay, well, we've made it this far. We'll just take care of it. We'll fix it. But I don't know. Do you guys have it fall on one more than the other usually?
I would say I'm with you. It's more loan specific. You know, if the loan's requiring
Mm-hmm.
it, typically the seller pushes back a little bit and, you know, makes the buyer kind of, you know, want to do it. And then if it's a, inspection report wise, typically I see sellers doing a lot of those repairs.
The most recent one I had was situational. So the family that was selling the house, the lady that was selling it, it was a POA situation. She was out of state. The kids were out of state. So the house was vacant but being taken care of by a neighbor. So in that, the buyer was willing to step up and take care of the repairs, even though it was an FHA, because they wanted to get to the closing table and the other folks were, states away. So I think it was situational on my last particular deal.
Yeah, which makes sense. I think it always just depends on what's going to be most efficient and what the motivation by both parties is for the most part.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it, the parties.
And physical abilities, if you've got, people that are, physically disabled or older or not able to do the things, and
or
the buyer's
if it's
willing
be
to do it
weeks before someone that can't do it themselves can get a contractor out or whatever it is. If the buyer can just get it taken care of, then that's another idea of when it might just fall on the buyer. And
which I think, is it VA that they can't do those things?
The
VA
buyer's
loan?
not supposed to front a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's to where the expense can't come from them necessarily. So, but it depends all on the situation.
Can they get in there with a
yeah.
paintbrush?
Yeah, right. Yeah, can
I'll
you
do
physically
it.
do the work then? Yeah, I'm not going to say that stuff doesn't happen. Or I'd like to just hire people like Bryan, and he just goes and does the work for you. Get a good agent like Bryan, he'll just go fix it for you. So we've all been there before doing stuff.
Spend your Saturday morning.
Yeah, 100% not in our job description, but you do it to get the job done then and get there. So. But yeah, I think a lot of those just, I guess my thought is it's situational, like you guys all said. Just depends on if the buyer is willing or able, if the seller's willing. If it's a 90-year-old seller and they have no money, they're physically not able to, they're financially not able to, so it comes to the buyer. Hey, do you want to buy this house or not? Are we figuring this out?
And it's hard when you get all the way to the appraisal point too, to just be ready to let it go.
You're 12 days from closing or something. Yeah, you're like, let's do this.
Yeah, for sure. Final point, final walkthroughs. I find a lot of times my buyers are okay with foregoing the final walkthrough. They're just very trustful that everything's going to be fine. But I saw this meme forever ago, and it was like you walk in the morning of closing to do a final walkthrough, and the fridge is missing. That was supposed to come with it. What do you do? Like stuff like that. Have you guys ever had that happen? Just there was a fridge missing or a hole in a wall or something?
Mine was, in our contract, our most recent contract, it does say that the house should be left clean in broom swept condition. And I had a house where the final walkthrough was not broom clean at all. And the sellers made every attempt in their defense under the situation that they were in to do their very best, but it did not live up to the standards of the buyer. So at that point, I feel like if I'm buying a house, I know I'm going to have to go in and wipe down walls and clean cobwebs and vacuum. So I don't have this expectation that I'm going to move my stuff in and not clean. But again, a missing fridge is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
I did just go through a house this over the weekend, and the house is for sale, obviously. And the sellers are taking appliances and something else with them. So what they did is they laminated a sheet and they put a picture of the replacement item and said, we're taking the Samsung set or whatever, but this is what's going to be in its place. And they literally laminated it and put that on the stove so you could see that the
I
microwave
think as long
stove.
as you're upfront about
Yeah, as long as
what's
people
going
know.
on.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really nice. Like I even took a video of that thing because I'm like, I'm going to store this for future use because that's I've seen people use Post-its on stuff like this works this light and this works this garage door, but to actually highlight and take pictures, and that's an extra step.
Yeah, and that's, I think, in the contract, to your point, being upfront about what it is, but a lot of times in the contract, the current appliances, the current, kitchen appliances or whatever, because if someone swaps out, I've had people do that. I've had
white
multiple
to black.
times. Yes, there's beautiful stainless steel.
And
And
now
then they
there's
show
like
up and
a
there's the
hot
old
point.
biscuit colored, the refrigerator from the garage that they've got in there. Well, they've got a refrigerator, but that's not at all what they were expecting.
Right.
So I've got a real quick story, the washing machine. A lady was selling a house, fantastic person to work with. Her kids had bought her the washer and dryer. She takes them, was a little bit confused about what needed to stay, I guess. Then buyer wanted them. They wanted that exact set back. They wanted her to bring these back. And I'm like, dude, her kids bought these. They ain't coming back. I offered to get them a nicer set. There's actually a better set than what was there. And like, no, we want these Maytags or whatever they were. I'm like, these are better than what's being offered to you is better than what's at my house. I'll take the crap from my house then. If you don't want. But yeah, so sometimes it just is a matter of the expectations, everybody being on the same page. But to answer your question, about 83 times over the years, I've had the wrong appliance be there or something taken that shouldn't have been taken. And that's just, it's hard to.
Comes a wild goose chase.
Yeah. Some people just, they get confused about what's supposed to be there. And I think you do everything you can. And it's a lot, there's a million things that need covered in a transaction.
And you just assume that they know.
Yeah.
In real estate school, they taught us about like the flowers. Somebody went back and dug up all grandma's flowers and they came back and all these beautiful roses or whatever were gone. And it's just bare dirt.
Yeah.
And like you would think, and they're moving out, they're not taking the landscape, but they did.
They did,
Yeah,
that's tough. Yeah, I've had just about every appliance there is moved or changed or something like that over the years. But again, you talk about it, you try to explain it, but hey, a fridge is a fridge, I guess. But
that's insane.
Cool. Good.
That's all I've got.
All right. Well, I've got a whole big section. We'll save it for next time then too. But let's talk about housing prices and things like that. Fannie Mae put out a big thing, but I'll leave everybody on a cliffhanger. Do you think housing prices are going up or down in the next couple of years? They put a big blue ribbon panel together as far as what they expect prices to do. Talking about interest rates, talking about housing prices. Everybody's just waiting for prices to drop and interest rates to drop and things. So I guess we'll circle back to that because that's a whole big conversation itself. I do have a real funny story I really want to get to quick. So we're still kind of a holiday season here. I think we're probably a week past Christmas when this comes out. Realtor accused of being a homewrecker for spreading holiday cheer. It was just weird. So I got a summary here. So an agent, Kari, you do this stuff. We do this stuff too. You send out a card, things like that. So a real estate agent. Just this year, the Georgia realtor Jenny Smith, don't know her, but she seems awesome, aimed to spread holiday cheer by sending Christmas cards to her community. She included extra cards to random individuals in her database. One recipient, David, last name redacted, received a card on his home, leading his wife to suspect he was secretly purchasing a property, and she did not recognize the sender. But the whole story goes into she thought, maybe he had a girlfriend he's buying a house for or something like that. So the misunderstanding prompted a tense phone call to Agent Smith to clarify the situation. The incident was resolved amicably, and Smith shared the story on TikTok, cautioned other agents about potential pitfalls on these well-intentioned gestures.
Oh my God. And that picture's hilarious.
Yeah. So I'm sure that's not the people then too.
No,
but
I know. That's funny.
It was just that one really stuck out to me as funny to where they just sent this card, and there was obviously a little bit of a miscommunication.
David must be doing well if he's got money to buy a house for a girlfriend.
His girl a house in. It kind of expanded a little bit more. Randomly paid. So this is I think from the wife. You sent it. Oh no, this is from David. I think you sent a Christmas card to my house by mistake, and now my wife is accusing me of buying a house for my hidden girlfriend because you supposedly talked to me back in June. You need to straighten this out before it gets very, very ugly.
Sounds like him and his wife need to communicate better.
Sounds like there's a lot going on there maybe then. So. The nervous Smith called the doghouse hubby who put his wife on the phone and told her to they're able to laugh it off at the end then. So
Oh my god.
I think this is her right here. I think that's the agent thing. But
Poor Jenny.
yeah, that was hilarious. So I guess be careful with what you're. I don't know what the card said. I don't know if it was just, if it really was that
Yeah, I don't know.
weird about it. I'm not
If you
sure.
just get a card that says Merry Christmas or something.
Yeah, something
like,
you're going straight to
Yeah.
where's the girlfriend at? Like,
Right.
where's she at? All right, we'll wrap this up here. I really do want to get to those numbers. We'll go next week. But so trivia from last week. We're talking Christmas lights still. Or I guess this was theft, the Home Alone stuff. What percentage of home thefts occurred during December? So what percentage of total home thefts and break-ins occur in December? I don't remember what you got. I think you guys were quite a bit higher than what it was, but it's 18%.
I was going to say, I think we were saying like 20 or 30
Yeah,
or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
18%. So, all right, so wrapped into this episode, what percentage of home buyers find their home inspection process the most stressful part of buying a home?
All of them.
Yeah. What percentage find this to be the most over financing, I guess, whatever else? Yeah, dealing with contracts, dealing with everything.
Inspection.
80%.
I'm gonna say 70. I feel like it's not that high, actually. I feel like they get to the
There's
inspection
no cash
part
prize,
and
so
they
we-
stress, and then they get to the rest of the whole financing part, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh God, this is a lot of
I think
paperwork."
financing is probably really stressful.
Yeah,
For people.
Right.
I'm
And the
changing mine to
physical
65.
moving. No. How about 50%?
Kari's closest here. According to,
Okay.
I think it's Porch.com, 44% of
Well,
home buyers find that.
Porch.com, that's-
So that's a reliable source. So, okay, what percentage of home buyers experience unexpected costs during the final walkthrough? So you're doing your final walkthrough. What percentage of home buyers find an unexpected cost?
I'll say 10%.
Yeah, low 15.
Yeah.
I hope it's
Somewhere
not
in there.
higher.
It is. It's way higher, which
Oh,
I didn't think
really?
of. About 29% of home buyers encounter unexpected issues or costs during the final walkthrough, according to Zillow. There you go for a reliable source. So 29%.
Jeez. Poor
They
That's
were
guys.
just paying attention to
Way higher.
what they were buying.
I don't know. Yeah, that just seems astronomically higher than I
Or
thought
they
it would
just
be.
figure
Okay,
out
going into
something.
appraisals. What percentage of home sales fall through due to low appraisal? So how many deals get blown up from a low appraisal? What percentage?
10.
Yeah, I was gonna say about 10. I'll go 12.
15.
All right, we'll find out next week. So that's episode 15. Make sure you check back to episode 16. We're going to talk a lot about numbers. I love numbers, stats, things. I got bar graphs, line graphs, everything in between. Then they make me not get excited about it. I do. So it'll be a good, I guess, looking at 2025, 26. It goes all the way through 2029. Again, nobody has a crystal ball, but it's pretty cool. So give us likes, comments, all those fun things you do on the social. We want some of your questions. We'd love to address those. But until next time, we will see you episode 16.